Hello, welcome to the Geeks Unleashed Late to the Party Book Club. This is episode 14.
14. Wow.
I
I don't think I was prepared for 14. So this is our Geeks Unleashed Book Club podcast. In addition to our weekly podcast, we kind of didn't really do much with the book club this year, but this is our annual Christmas episode. And our annual Christmas book club episode, we always cover Scott Pilgrim. So here we are with Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, which is volume 3 of the series.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Jasmine.
And as usual, for our Christmas episode, we are joined by Robbie from Pop Culture Philosophers. Thank you for joining us.
What is up? Happy to be here. Happy Christmas, everybody. Happy Christmas.
I know.
Christmas.
Yeah.
I do feel like this is Christmas time now. Like this is I think it's quite nice actually. Like Christmas, trees are up, lights are up, presents are getting put under the tree, everyone's sort of, I wouldn't say I'm winding down for work, I'm busier than ever, but kind of trying to wind down. And then we pull off the shelf Scott Pilgrim, which is now slowly becoming a tradition. So
a Christmas tradition.
A Christmas tradition.
Yes.
So,
everybody's got those traditions that just happen. Like I know people that watch Lord of the Rings every Christmas for some reason, or Harry Potter, or they watch, like, Star Trek is a thing to me I associate with Christmas.
I am wearing a Star Trek t-shirt right now.
Look at that. This was meant to be. And Scott Pilgrim is a holiday tradition now.
Yes.
It literally started by accident, where we were like, when the book club first started, I was like chatting to Robbie. This is when we actually didn't really know each other. How weird is that? So I can't remember what we did for the first episode, but we did V for Vendetta, and I remember chatting with Robbie about books that he hadn't read, and Scott Pilgrim was one of the ones. And then so we did Scott Pilgrim Volume 1 for our third episode, and then a year later, episode 13, we're back for Volume 2. And then in December 2022, we are back for Volume 3. So, what are we going to do in 4 years, Robbie, when we're done? So
I guess we'll start over in black and white.
Or we could pick some of Brian Lee's other books rather than just read. So anyway, there's a variety of characters in this book, and actually Robbie, before we start recording, did highlight there's a good double-page spread, but there are many characters now. There's sort of 10 characters, although there's several main characters, but Scott Pilgrim, Knives Chow, Wallace Wells, Scott's roommate, Ramona Flowers, there's various others, Lynette, Julie, Stephen. The evil ex-boyfriend of this book is Todd. Envy Adams, whose real name is Natalie, which she hates, and young Neil. So I love that he's called young Neil. I think it's great. So you need a young Neil around. He's like the same age as the rest of them. They call him young Neil. I know Jasmine is what I always call her, the queen of summary. So do you want to quickly summarize?
I mean, it's a lot more of the same to me.
Yeah.
It is we're doing Todd as the evil ex in this one.
Yeah.
And to me though, there's not very much of the evil ex battles that I liked in the first 2 volumes, but it's a lot more Natalie. So this one is a bit more dramatic. So it's a lot of Natalie and the drama going around. Oh, excuse me, Envy. It's a lot of Envy and all of the drama going around with Envy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my summary. It's a lot of envy in this one.
Before we get started, I think it's quite nice we were talking about this before we started, but for those people that are listening or watching on YouTube, Robbie, how did you read Scott Pilgrim?
I read it in the paperback color edition, so it's book 2, but it actually has books 3 and 4 in it. So I had to, before we went live, if you remember, I had to verify the ending of the book.
Did you skip ahead a little bit then?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And Jasmine, how did you read it?
I actually read this one in black and white, but I read the first 2 volumes in color. So it was going backwards that way was not a letdown, but it was definitely didn't have the same impact, I think, reading it not in color, since I was already used to reading it in color. So it was different.
There's a little joke in Volume 3 about how when Ramona dyes her hair,
yes,
in the color one, it says this joke's a lot better in black and white. So, I read this in the hardback color edition as well. So As I've like, these are actually, I'll show you people on YouTube anyway. So I've got volume 1, and here's volume 2, and volume 3, and I've got all 6, which took me a while to get because they're not the cheapest of books. So I used to have the black and white years ago, but when I got these color ones, I sold them all off. And I love these hardbacks. They're now on my bookshelf, which I managed to sneak a bookshelf into the front room, which my wife wasn't overly joyed about, but it showed up last week. So
how did this get here? I have no idea. We're just gonna keep it though.
Unfortunately, she was out, and when I showed up with it, she was in. So I planned on doing all of it while she was out. And yeah, so now there's a bookshelf in the living room full of graphic novels. So I was like,
as there should be, Mark, as there should.
Yeah, I was like, I'm done with leaving these in the garage in my wardrobe. They are now going in the front room. I think it's time. So it's time. I've matured. So I'm matured enough.
I've upgraded myself to bookcases.
Yeah, I've upgraded myself to bookcases. But anyway, no, I'm just always curious. I think it's nice to know how we've read the material that we're going to talk about. So I think before we talk about even the story, it's good to talk about the artwork itself. So, and I guess with me and Robbie, we can talk about the colouring. Jasmine will have to leave you out.
That's fine.
Robbie, like, what did you think on the artwork and the colouring?
Well, pretty much as I've been saying over these last couple of years, what I'm loving about each volume is that the artwork tightens up. It gets a lot better, and he gets to experiment a lot more. It's very simple in the early volumes, but then when the fighting and the more zany, crazy nature of the story gets introduced, the artwork gets very dynamic. And some of the fight scenes are crazy. The characters are incredibly expressive, and that's getting better. And the storytelling quality is tightening up as well. He started doing a lot of like real life referencing in part 2 for some of the backgrounds and stuff, like when dude's skateboarding down that staircase or whatnot. And there's more of that here. There's more world building. Each character has a distinctive look. And a lot of people that have a very simple kind of cartoony line style, a lot of the characters will look the same. It's kind of like that Simpsons kind of flair where all the characters kind of look the same. That's not the case here, even though there are certain things and elements like they all have the same type of expressive giant eyes and just the proportion. But like Envy is completely different than Kim, and Kim's completely different than Ramona and Knives, and they all have their very distinctive look. So I think that O'Malley's doing a fantastic job of leveling up, like Scott Pilgrim does, volume to volume, and the coloring is really good. You could easily just use some flat colors on something like this, but the way that it's Nathan Fairbairn, right? The way that the colors add like gradients, they add texture, and they actually add shape and depth, which is really astounding to me. I read this the first time when it came out in black and white, and that was like when they first released. So reading them again in color, it is a more developed kind of feel to the world. I love the coloring. It affects the mood because this is the moody one. This is the moody volume because it's the infinite sadness, right? And we're learning about Scott's, depressive past and stuff like that. And the colors accentuate that like crazy. And I do love the bit where we actually see what Ramona's hair color looks like. And it does say this joke doesn't work as good in color as it did in the black and white. But I love the art. I think it's just getting better and better. And the layouts, the storytelling, everything about it, even like the weird trippy scenes where he likes the Evil Dead 2 scene where the deer head starts coming to life and laughing and stuff like that. Like it's got an energy, but it's got a closeness to it as well. So it's not just zany, crazy, wild, dynamic fun. It's also got a really good core of who these people are, and they're very well-rounded characters visually.
It is Nathan Fairbairn, by the way, who did the coloring. So I agree with you. Like I think because if you think about Volume 1, how it was subtle that we were essentially these characters are almost when I read it, I try to almost imagine that these are video game characters and that we're a bit like Wreck-It Ralph that we're seeing the behind the scenes of the fight scenes. So like the fight scenes are probably like in a video arcade somewhere, but we're seeing the scenes between the fight scenes. That's kind of how I sometimes imagine it. But like in volume 3, he's fully embraced the sort of video game nature of these books, and like you just said, the craziness and the zaniness of it all. So like with the techno arm, so so we're seeing a lot more detail and craziness as well. But I do honestly love the coloring of this book, and I love how it shifts and changes between what we've got, and it embraces as well the cartooniness of it, a bit like sort of 1960s the Batman TV show, like here where it's got suck just written across the page here. Just reminds me of like Adam West with the pow and the bam, and, so I'm really enjoying that. But I love how it shifts between what we're reading in the present to when we're doing the flashbacks as well, how the complete style changes, like the artwork changes as well. Like look at this rainfall here. What about you, Jasmine?
I think like Robbie said, like the detailing gets a bit better. So the fight scenes, like that first fight scene where Todd throws Scott through the brick wall, just like there's it feels like there's nothing missing. Even though I didn't read this one in color, like you can still see like the bricks and the motion of him going through the wall. So I do appreciate that the details do get better as the volumes keep going. But I really did miss not having the color, especially because I know Ramona's hair changes all the time. So I don't get all of the fun quirks. I think you still get the same story, but I think it's just when it's in black and white, it doesn't have the same quirky feel as the color versions do.
I imagine it was probably done in black and white due to keeping costs down, but Scott Pilgrim's obviously been very successful, so they were able to keep releasing it in many formats and introduce color, as they have with The Walking Dead. So, so what did you guys threat? So like when Volume 2 happened, we had a massive flashback sequence at the beginning with Scott Pilgrim and introducing his life before he moved, and we had flashbacks similarly in Volume 3, but it wasn't at the beginning. It was kind of dotted throughout.
Yeah,
I sometimes found it a little bit jarring initially. I had to sort of double check a couple of times. But what did you guys think about the flashbacks? Right, Robbie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I love the flashbacks because it develops this history, right? And it adds to this world building. And usually when we talk about world building in comics or something, we're talking about like building up these big lands and all these kingdoms. We're talking about Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, building up a fantasy world. Sometimes it's about building up the world of regular 20-somethings in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Even building it up with the quirky things like the fact that they like in Canada, nobody knows that in America they can do all this crazy stuff, right? And like there's little elements in there. But I love those flashbacks because it does develop out not just the backstory for Scott, but the backstory for everybody else around him. In the previous 2 volumes, people that seemed like they were just going to be side characters to support Scott, narratively, they actually become real fleshed out characters. Everybody has their own thing. And in Scott's flashbacks, we find out things about other people from that time as well. Yeah. And I love learning more about Scott. And I also love in this one that they're starting to integrate Ramona more as an essential figure to the story, but not so much like, she's not just the quest for Scott at the end. She becomes a force on her own in this book. And then she's going to start having a lot of flashbacks and stuff too. So like, I really like how they start kind of basically splitting the focus into 2 main characters. And I think that really kind of starts here. And you had mentioned, Jasmine, that there's not a lot of fighting so much in this one, but there is. It's just like there's that awesome Envy, Knives, Ramona battle, and Scott's like, oh, I missed it. They fought. Oh, man. But, I actually like the flashbacks and that's something that's going to continue because this is a backstory that we need to know, not just to build up Scott's character or Ramona's character, but why Scott was where he was in the beginning, why he was dating Knives, why he lived, he's got a sad life, y'all, but he's got kind of a positive attitude about it. But there's something there. And I think that's where those flashbacks is where the story gets incredibly subtle sometimes, I think.
I was gonna say, like, I think that I liked the flashbacks. I just found initially had to double check that I was now in a flashback just like each time it happened. So
yeah. Well, I also like that they don't, be like, 33 years ago, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do like these little techniques like with this one where it's like they were 11, and
yeah.
So I really like that. And by the way, I love that Todd pulls that same moon trick with every chick he's trying to talk to.
What about you? Did you like Jasmine? Did you like the flashbacks? Or
yeah, I think they're helpful. Normally it's kind of like putting something like in a big chunk of flashback is one thing, but I did appreciate the way that it's like every section we kind of get some sort of flashback. So then I don't have to go back pages to be like, wait a minute, but wait, did this already happen? Or when? So the way that they do it, it is a bit jarring, but the way that they do it, I think it works. They use it to great effect, I would say.
I prefer this style. I prefer this style to the previous one. Although I can understand why they did the previous one because there's quite a lot to tell in the first volume of the flashback. But I actually did quite like that every time. It felt like every time something really like, I don't know, cool was happening in the present, all of a sudden you were quickly pulled away from it because that kept you wanting to carry on going because you were like, oh, I want to, they were kind of trying to tie the flashbacks to present day events sometimes, or almost put a pause between something happening of like something crucial happening in the present. A bit like if you're watching a TV show, like you'd have to wait until the following week or something, but you've just got to wait 2 or 3 pages to come back and find out what's going to happen. So I enjoyed the breaks of the flashbacks, and they felt like it was sort of just teased his origin, essentially his origin and everyone else's origins. So and I think it was good to find out more about these people you're reading, because one of the things we all mentioned was the cast has massively increased since book 1 started. I think book 1, the focus was very much on Knives, Wallace, Scott and Ramona, and now it's actually got quite a big cast now. Although some people are still kind of one note, a little bit like young Neil and stuff, but the cast is definitely growing, and there was more people to tell the story of. So like MV and Todd and stuff. So we've kind of sort of talked about how there is a bigger cast, but Robbie, you just said as well that Ramona has moved from book 1 to becoming the Quest, and I did notice this as well in book 3, that she's now becoming a main character. The fact that she got 5 sequences on her own. I just wanted to gather like what both our thoughts were, because I finished this book still thinking Scott's still a bit of a loser. Like I just like I just don't get the appeal. I'm like, yeah, okay, he's in a band, but he doesn't work. He like shares his flatmate's bed. He's going out for meals with his new girlfriend, paying for it on his best mate's credit card. Like and I thought, I don't get the appeal. Like I can't imagine being 23 like and girls falling at my feet while I'm sharing my mate's bed, using his credit card, not paying for shit. And like I don't know, like I just kind of wanted to get well, just first of all, Robbie, what's your thoughts on Scott himself at this point?
I think he is a loser, obviously, and he's got some things going on. But I've known plenty of dudes, and even in portions of my life, for some reason, you just have this irresistible charm, and all of a sudden, you're attracting a lot of people to you, right? And it's weird. I've seen this happen in my life with myself, but mostly with other people. Where you're just like, how does that dude get all these like women interested in him? He's a loser and he's terrible.
That is exactly what I said before we started recording. I was like, how does anyone want to be with Scott Pilgrim? I just don't understand it at all.
I think because there's an innocent charm to him, right? And obviously Ramona's in a spot, which that's going to get developed as the series progresses, of why she is in the place where she's in, right? But one of the things I love about it is the relationship between Scott and Ramona, to me, feels incredibly authentic, because it's, even as it's going, it's awkward, right? Like when you meet someone and very quickly start dating, Well, you can be a few weeks into it, you still don't really know that person, and there are these awkward kind of bits. And Scott does not have game, right?
No, not at all.
He's just got some kind of appeal, and even Ramona tells him, you're a loser, but you're kind of a cutish loser, or something like that, right? So that's what it is. But on the other side, we were talking about how he's not very much a heroic figure in 1 and 2, and obviously this is a whole series of books, but in this one, he starts doing the right thing. He starts changing a little bit, like when he goes and consoles Knives, because usually he just ignores her, right? Like she tells him in book 2 that she loves him, and he's like, yeah, I think we need to break up.
Yeah,
and he's just not a good dude. But now he's there trying to help her, and not for his own gain. You know what I'm saying?
I actually thought that was a nice scene, what you were just talking about, when he sat with Knives in the alleyway, and although she took it the wrong way, but it still was, his intentions were nice and honorable there, I thought.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this though, if you're in a new relationship with someone, one thing that you probably don't want to do is be a complete neurotic mess when your ex comes around, because that means you're not over some stuff yet, and that doesn't make Ramona feel very well. But I love that there's, on the flip side, there's Todd, the evil vegan. So
oh, I love that he's an evil vegan.
Oh man, vegan superpowers! Wow.
You telling me gelato's got milk in it?
Yeah.
Jazzy, what about your thoughts on Scott? Is it similar to ours, or have you got a different view?
No, I do think he's a loser. Like I don't see the appeal. I don't know.
As a woman on the podcast,
like,
if you were 23 and you met Scott Pilgrim, would you fall at his feet?
Absolutely not. But like at 14 or 15, maybe, right? Yeah. But like at 23, that's where the disconnect is for me. I'm like 23, I was already graduated from college. Like there's no freaking way. Like we are way past that. Like, yeah. So no, I don't. That's always what I think about as I read through the volumes. I'm just like, this guy's already 23. Like if we were still in high school, like when they do the flashbacks, I can completely see like how he's a total idiot and doesn't really understand anything. But like at 23, that's not cute anymore.
Well, and don't forget though, he is the best fighter in the province. Okay.
Well, well, but I mean, Robbie, you have to sit through so much to get to that though.
Yeah, that is something they all blow his trumpet about. Is that what a good fighter he is? Yeah. He's like, that's probably the one thing he's got going for him. He is the best fighter. And anyway, as we said, Ramona has stepped up her game as sort of from conquest to actually one of the front runners of this book, and the book isn't now just solely about Scott. And to be honest, the book isn't solely about Ramona as well. I think Envy got a good chunk of this book as well, which I quite liked. In fact, I mean, Envy is on my cover here, so Envy did have a good chunk of storytelling, to be honest. But Ramona, for me, I enjoyed her interactions with Wallace and Scott, and I love that she's kind of got more take charge than Scott, like, cuts his hair, and even her fight scenes as well, I thought were brilliant. Like she pulls out that hammer like out of the Mary Poppins style bag and just goes nuts. And I think she's very much can stand her own, and and does have that take charge energy. And I think she's quite, I don't know, like, although her career, it's quite weird to read this considering Amazon, how big it is now, like how she was the only Amazon delivery person in Canada, in wherever they were in Canada. Like, and now there's probably 2 or 3 of them that live in every street now in Canada. So like I actually just remember in the volume 1, like Scott goes to what's that website again? He's like Amazon.ca. Like as like no one had heard of it. It's quite weird how times moves on reading these books. But Robbie, what's your thoughts on Ramona herself?
Ramona's my favorite character in the entire series. I love her. I think she's adorable. If I was a 23-year-old loser, I would be at her feet. I'll tell you that. Like, there's just something mysterious and cool about her. And then by book 3, she's becoming more ingrained into Scott's world, right? And she's starting to develop her own relationships with these people. I love that he freaks out that she hangs out with his sister and stuff like that. And I love her so much in this book. Like, she becomes so much more of an important figure, and we're starting to learn more about her past. And it's not just about, like we were saying, Scott and his goal to like conquer and Ramona at the end of the night or whatever. She is definitely the leader of that relationship, right? And there are plenty of relationships that I see like that where, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody takes different roles in their different relationships. But I think it's charming. They're like cute, weird love that they have, and she's trying to like give them hints that you can be better at this. You can not sleep on your roommates. You could not share a bed with your gay roommate. That might be cool. And there's some real honest moments, especially I think the most honest moments in this book come from Ramona. And for instance, when she's just like pissed at Scott that night, and then Wallace is like, hey, he's got to stay with you because I just picked up this dude. And it's an awkward night, and Scott like wakes up and he's like, I'll just go ahead and leave. But Ramona's she's not Knives, right? She is way more developed and way more understanding of who she is and who her place is. And I just think she's adorable. I love the hair color change. I love the style. I'm telling you, man, if Ramona walked in my life, I'd be head over heels, man.
I agree with you about the mystery. I do want to know more about her character. It's been subtly hinted at throughout all 3 volumes. You said that flashbacks happen for her beyond volume 3. So I'm keen to see more of her background, like what they keep alluding to this background for her. And I agree with you. Like Ramona probably is that cool chick that I would have dated or wanted to date. I probably would have got nowhere near her, but I probably would have stood no chance at 23. But yeah, like I would be intrigued by this girl who dyes her hair multiple colors and rollerblades around and has a mysterious past and energy from New York. I'd be keen. So
she's not from New York. She only lived there for a couple of years.
Sorry. She stayed there briefly. Yeah. I forgot about that. What about you, Jasmine?
Yeah, I like that she's blunt, honestly. Like I like that she's very much like, no, that's really not how this is gonna work. Or like she's always that person that like pops the bubble. So I love the snark. I'm trying to get out of the sun here. The snark that she brings to like all the conversations. So she to me is probably the snappiest character. In the series so far that we've come across, and that I appreciate because Scott kind of has like that even keel, like everything he does is very all like on the same level, whereas Ramona comes in and like I don't know, she just seems like she's a step ahead of everybody else. And so it's always fun to watch her interact with people because to me she reacts the way that I react. It's like, so as the reader, like, because we have a bigger picture of what's going on. So when she says something, it's like, that's what I was thinking while I was reading this too. So she really feels like she is kind of coming at you from the reader's perspective. So it's always fun to me to kind of see what she's going to say or to guess what she's going to say next. Also, there's like the sequence where she's fighting with Envy. And like, I swear she looks like she's wearing a Miss Marvel costume. Like, I don't know if that's like intentional or what. She has this purse that has a star on it that kind of looks like Captain America's shield, and then I don't know, it's a very like Marvel vibe going on there. It's bizarre. I don't. Let me see if I can find a page number.
We're all flipping through the books now.
Yeah, it's the scene right where Scott like finds Envy's hidden spot behind her knee.
Oh yeah.
I love that she doesn't want to know about that. She's like, like don't tell me.
Yeah.
When we were making out, she'd no, stop. Like,
oh, she does look just like Miss Marvel, and more like the Kamala, right?
Isn't that crazy?
And Kamala hadn't even been created at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude.
So maybe they pull their inspiration from Scott Pilgrim. Who knows?
Yeah. She's got the leggings, the little skirt, and yeah, you're right. It looks like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like right here, here.
Yeah.
So podcast people, you'll have to go to YouTube. But
see, in color, maybe not so much because the colors are off. But like in black and white, she 100% looks like Miss Marvel. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Ramona's so cool.
Yeah. See, that's what I mean. She was ahead of the curve. She was Miss Marvel before there was Miss Marvel. So. She knew that shit that they were going to pull with the Young Avengers, like, and like, well, no, she wasn't in the Young Avengers, was she? Champions. There you go. I don't think she was a Young Avenger, was she? Anyway, um, there's some as we were going, Robbie, reading these books. There's one thing that really kept jumping out at me. Do you think these books aged well? We've got gay references. We've got, I would say, some. I wouldn't say they're racist, but they're. I thought the comment "nooble Asians" really jumped out at me as potentially things that maybe not so much appropriate now. What are your thoughts, Robbie, on how well these books have aged in terms of their descriptions of people?
I think they age just fine because it's capturing a period of time, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like when you watch a movie like Dazed and Confused or Clerks or any of these kind of slice of life movies that capture the vibe of an era. Like that's what it is. And I don't think there's anything mean spirited.
Oh, no, I don't.
Exactly. And I think that, back in the aughts, I guess that's what we call them now, right?
The aughts.
Back in the aughts, this is how people talked, and this is how people referenced each other. And it's also a way, like, for instance, be like, hey, this is my gay roommate. That is something somebody would have said back then, but it's also showing an acceptance of it, right? Because nobody seems to be bothered by it. In fact, another one of my favorite characters in this is that I don't remember the dude, but he's like a gay dude who's somebody's friends, and he just like is so catty and snarky, and he's just always under his breath insulting everybody, except for Todd. He's so hot, he's amazing, or something like that. So I actually like it. And if you look at the comics of the time, this would have been considered at that time a little bit more inclusive, right? And so I understand that we can look at it with today's lens, and I understand. And the thing is, social revolutions are a progression that never stops, right? We can always improve how we relate and communicate with other people and respond and reference other people, right? So I think it ages just fine because it does capture that time, and it doesn't do anything to me in a mean-spirited way. And I find it has a very authentic kind of natural vibe to it. And it's also, because it comes across so zany, it doesn't feel as like those bits aren't connected to any of the really heavy shit. You know what I'm saying? So I think it ages fine for what it is. But I also lived through the odds. If you're like a 17-year-old reading this today, you might have a completely different experience.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine, because everybody now gets so offended by everything. I think our generation, we went through, we kind of, I guess my parents' generation were happy to be offensive about everything. And I think we were kind of just off of that generation. So we were like in the middle. Some of us would get offended, some of us wouldn't. And now everybody just gets offended. I happily, had friends that spoke like this. This wasn't, this was a normal, like you just said, a normal part of life. But and I can't tell this story now on a podcast, but I worked with someone who would say extremely offensive things. This is about even 8 years ago. And like me and my wife talk about it now, saying like that guy would never survive in today's working environment, even 8 years ago. And things have progressed, and I've got no problem with reading this now of that generation. It would be crazy to see people now talking like that, like, oh, this is my gay friend or whatever. People would be horrified in today's world, but back then this is kind of how people did speak. So
yeah, well, there's this part nowadays where it's almost like it's not offensive, I think, to understand that somebody is in some way different than you, right? And like people don't want to even point that out because they think that that's revealing something inside, and like, no, like that's how our brains work. We differentiate, like like that's what we do. We look at something, we differentiate it from other things. But it's if people read this today, I think the most offensive thing would be the personification of vegans. That's what really people in the tip.
Oh, Jasmine, what about yourself? How do you think it aged?
Oh, I still think, like, I remember reading the first one, and when we did that episode of book club, it was kind of like, I feel like these are conversations that I have had with friends in the past. Like the dialogue seems like some stuff that I would have said at some point when I was this age. You know what I mean? Like it definitely felt, and I guess because we're all the same age, like it feels very reminiscent of when I was younger. So it still feels that way. The way that they all interact with each other. And I again, like looking at it from when I was living through that time, it seems fine to me. Like, but yeah, I could 100% see vegans having a problem with Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
I'd love to know if somebody early 20s was to read this, what their thoughts were. So, anyway, with video games, I don't know why this popped in my head. Do you remember Streets of Rage? You remember, Robbie? You were a Sega Genesis fan, so
I got that on my Genesis Mini right now. Streets of Rage 2, I think, is on there. So yeah.
Did you play Streets of Rage, Jasmine?
No, I never played that one.
Do you know what I'm talking about though?
Yeah.
Okay, so like with each level, the game progressed in terms of hardness. Obviously, there was a boss at the end of every level. Now, these books, if you were to obviously apply the video game rules, that each one gets harder. This book to me kind of felt like it doubled it up with having Ramona had Envy and obviously Scott had Todd. Just what are our thoughts on, has this game progressed in terms of hardness, in terms of end level bosses for this level? So, Robbie, do you think they've got harder?
Yeah, I think
the bosses got harder.
I think definitely, because like if you're looking back to book 1, he takes that dude out so easily.
Yes.
Right? Like
yes.
And then in the second one, we have that thing, and he kind of tricks the guy because he can't handle the actor, right? There's no way he's gonna be able to take him, so he has to trick him. He has to get smart, right? And this one, Scott's screwed, man. Like if it wasn't for that random band coming in to like help him out, and I love that they bring that band back, like that band that like killed the audience before they opened on like the previous.
Oh yeah, on the first one, yeah.
And then like they show up and they got these like glowing hands. They don't even use instruments anymore. And like they've leveled up. They've like reached and attained some level of musical consciousness. And so I love that it's showing that Scott now has to have support. He needs help. Mm-hmm. And it's paralleling his story in the book where he's in a very isolated, lonely spot. And that's what this book is developing, is the idea of what really got him here, how Envy really messed with him. Right. And she's not a good person, right, at all. And Todd's not the boss here. It's Envy. Envy's the boss to me. And having to get over that. And in the next book, it starts in very happy times with Scott and Ramona because they've gotten through this together. And this is something that you have to get through, especially when you're a loserish 23-year-old who's got this very cool, mysterious, hot girlfriend. She's going to have a past, and that's hard for a lot of people to deal with, especially when they're dealing with their own past. Mm-hmm. So I do think they leveled it up because the Todd stuff is played for jokes, but he is a legitimate threat. Scott has to reach out and get help from everybody around him. And this is something that he's learning as a person through his relationship with Ramona, which is actually turning him into a better person in this book.
I actually can relate to something you said there. Like, I can't remember how old I was, 24 or 5 or something. And I dated this hot chick, mysterious girl for like a few months, a year maybe. And I definitely had some of those insecurities that Scott had. Like she had some mysterious past or whatever, or was very elusive about herself. And like I definitely could say I relate to that whole thing back then. Like now whilst I would be interested, I would have no time for it. So now I'd be like, man, look, I got to work.
I got a mortgage. I can't.
I ain't got time to spend 8 hours getting some shit from 10 years out of you. Like, anyway.
And I love the flip side of it too. Ramona's trying to find out what happened to Scott. Right. Because he's not open about what's happened. And so they're both discovering this about each other. And you said it right. The insecurities, that's what they're both dealing with. And they're going to come out of this a stronger couple. But trust me, it's we still got a few books to go. So it's not all hunky-dory.
Jasmine, what do you think about the bosses getting harder?
Yeah, I like that it got drawn out. So we have that first like sequence where Scott gets thrown through a wall, and then it's several little chapters before we get, the big fight. So I like that it happens in phases versus like a one and done kind of thing. So I think that at least in the fighting sense, the progression of Scott fighting the evil exes is getting better. And now I'm at the point where it's like, what stupid thing is going to happen when it's all over? Because last time it was the coins, and it was just like, this is even enough for bus fare.
Yeah, like he gets an extra life, which I thought was a cool twist. So.
Yeah.
I love that bit where he's like, it's scaring me. He's like,
Yeah.
scared to touch it. And in book 2, he gets like +2 to his skateboarding skill. He's like, man, I never chose that. I can't use this item. It just goes away.
I like the fact that that Todd is throughout the book, and also he comes in at the end of book 2. So I love that Todd is kind of got more of a build up, as in we see him rather than in book 1 it was like the letter, the email, and then 3 pages of fight. So I love that Todd and Scott have a battle sort of midway through before the final battle at the end, and I think that's quite cool because that's very much TV and movies, that you don't just show up and fight the villain at the end. You normally have a midway fight, and then you lose the midway fight before the final showdown. So I thought that was pretty cool. This book is littered with gags. Do you have a favorite gag that runs through this book, Robbie?
The vegan bit, man.
Yes,
the whole vegan bit, like he's got to go to this temple. There's like this secret organization. It's like Scientology or something.
Yes, exactly.
And and obviously he's not a vegan, and then just when he's like cheating on Envy with the drummer. And then they come out of that place, and like there's this bit where like they cut off her arm and her panties are still on the arm. I think that's a fun little bit there too. But it's the vegan Todd thing. That cracks me up so much. And it's probably the most offensive thing in the whole book.
But it is so funny. It's so funny because like, honestly, there are so many times where it's like you meet a vegan and you know immediately that you've met a vegan because they're very happy to tell you that they're vegan. And they always like throw that kind of shame on you for like, you're having a burger. That's horrible. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. It even makes it better that he's also a bass player. So then they have a bass battle or whatever, like bass battle fight.
Yeah.
I'd love to sit there with vegans and tell them about all the protein they're missing out on and how important that is for their growth.
They have answers for that, believe me.
I'm sure they do have answers for that. So
I love it when those vegan police come in and they like have finger guns. Like I thought that was so stupid. The first time I read it, I was like, wait, seriously? Like finger guns? Cool. And then as I kept reading, I was like, no, this is perfect. It has to be finger guns. Like what else could it possibly be? Tofu. They're going to throw tofu at you.
No vegan diet, no vegan powers, bitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so throughout this book, there's a theme. So I kind of was thinking about it with the theme of this book. So I was trying to, we've got the video game aspect. We've got, we have got the backstory of these characters. But I was trying to actually break this down a little bit. I did do a bit of research here. It wasn't just all me here. So defeating, this is kind of why I came to. So defeating each boyfriend, to me, felt like defeating a kind of a part of a toxic past of your past. So, each boyfriend might represent a different personality trait of potentially of your own, because you said, Robbie, earlier in the book, if you run into an ex-girlfriend, if you're still showing you're bothered about them and hung up on them and stuff like that, so I just that's what I kind of broke it down to. And you can see where Scott does defeat Todd, and obviously saying goodbye to Envy, how they're both of them as a couple are moving on and making progressions and saying goodbye to those things that are kind of weighing them down. And to me, it just feels like although these fights are very video gamey and comic booky, I feel like Scott and Ramona are both maturing with each fight. And I just kind of wondered what you guys thought about themes and what maybe these battles might represent on a bigger scale. Robbie, what about yourself?
Well, like we kind of touched on earlier, when you enter into a new relationship with someone, you enter into a relationship with their past, right? In their world. And that can be a scary thing to discover. And sometimes it can be rather intimidating, right? Like think about the movie Chasing Amy. Like that's what happens in that movie. This dude gets intimidated by his girlfriend's past, right? And so Scott's kind of doing that. We're also seeing the side where Scott is like he's in a rut. Like Scott doesn't like himself. You know, that's why Scott doesn't make these progressions that he probably should at 23 years of age. And he is in the state of arrested development. And and they reveal in here why. It's because Envy completely like just wrecked this dude, right? Like everything that happened with the band, the way that she turned and changed. And that happens too, especially at this age when people are still finding out who they are. Mm-hmm. Somebody will just change on you, and that can either crush you or you can just kind of move on and grow from it. Scott got crushed, right? So now he has this opportunity for growth. And what I love about it, like what I was saying, was he needs the support of everybody around him. So to me, this book is about the infinite sadness that resulted in where we were at the beginning of book 1. And it's showing him starting to make those steps to be a better person and to progress in his life. And it is heavily influenced by Ramona and heavily influenced by his friends, because he's finally listening and he's finally confronting some of that stuff that he's scared to confront on his own. And so him and Ramona, like you said, they grow as a couple. This is their first, we're now officially after the honeymoon phase, right? In this one, there's tension in their relationship, right? And then by the end of it, because they've banded together to defeat a common enemy, which is both of their exes, they grow as a couple, and Scott's going to grow a little bit as a person until the next challenge comes along. And so this is
4 or 5,
right? Yeah, this is the story of a relationship developing and growing, and how that corresponds to you developing at the same time. Because the only way a relationship grows and blossoms is when you yourself are improving personally, right? And you do that with the support of other people. So that's what I think it's about. It's about the infinite sadness, and how do we overcome that? We overcome that with each other.
I think something I got told earlier in the year was you can't change other people. All you can do is change yourself and make improvements on yourself. And to me, it feels like with Scott's defeat of each villain or each ex-boyfriend, it's kind of like his own progression. So I personally would like to see Scott progress outside of that. Hopefully, as the books continue, we'll see him get a job or some form of actual direction that isn't around Ramona. But I would like to see greater progression. But I do feel that there's an element of his maturity starting to come through slightly. But you know, what about yourself, Jasmine?
I guess I don't see it that deep. I think his ability to work with other people has gotten better. So if that counts as maturing, then sure. But I just don't ever think of Scott Pilgrim and mature. Like, I don't think that they belong in the same sentence.
maybe one day.
yeah. I'll keep reading and we'll find out. But no, I think he's definitely getting, at least like Robbie said, like he's not like trying to do this whole lone wolf thing anymore. So at least he's kind of open to the idea of needing help from other people.
Last year, Robbie, we asked you, we all talked about it. The book's set around the mid-90s, and we said about favourite bands in the 90s. This year, I thought I'd take the same question and say, what was some of your favourite 90s movies of this generation?
90s movies. Yeah. My favorite 90s movies were Dazed and Confused, Pulp Fiction, Clerks, Mallrats. I loved... The 90s were when I was getting into independent films, right? Going to the video store. I remember intentionally flipping over the back of movies, and if it was written and directed by the same person, I would watch it. Like, I was like really pretentious about that, right? Like, I was like, this is written and directed by the same person. That means it's a more coherent vision. But that's what I was into. I was getting into Tarantino. I was getting into Linklater. I was getting into Rodriguez. I was getting into Kevin Smith and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, all the big blockbuster stuff too. I love the Batman movies. Batman Forever was a big deal to me in the 90s, as well as the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. But in the midst of that, like, my favorite movies from that era are like the Tarantino, Linklater, it's Dazed and Confused, Pulp Fiction, and Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy. That was my jam, especially back then.
Fifth Element came out in the 90s.
What's that?
I said Fifth Element came out in the 90s.
Oh yeah, and Fifth Element's a good one too. Let's throw it. But Men in Black came out in the 90s. That was a big one.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
The last 2 episodes we reviewed all 4 Men in Blacks. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, y'all.
No.
We were sorry to have reviewed the fourth one. We definitely were.
Don't worry. Last night we just talked about all three of the final three Silent Night, Deadly Night films, and those are all weird stretches. So,
was it the Truman Show came out in the 90s?
Yeah. I like one in the 90s. Around the time the Truman Show, it was Matthew McConaughey one, Ed TV. Do y'all remember that?
Yes.
I didn't see that.
Loved that one. Loved it.
Total Recall, Independence Day. Oh, The Matrix. That came out in 1999, right at the very end.
Oh yeah.
Can't forget The Matrix.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh, Fight Club.
Fight Club, American Beauty.
See, the only film I can think of that kind of reminds me of Scott Pilgrim from the 90s is Empire Records. I love Empire Records.
That's literally, as I wrote this question, that's what I thought about was Empire Records.
Yeah.
I remember watching Empire Records in the 90s. I was fucking dying. I literally was laughing so hard watching that. Like, I remember watching that film for the first time with my parents. And it was kind of a weird moment in our lives where I was able to laugh at the jokes in the film, knowing what they meant, where my parents also knew what they meant. And I remember there was one line where the guy goes off to gets arrested, and the guy says, "Oh, don't drop the soap," and I was fucking dying. I'm like, and then my dad was laughing because I was laughing, and then my mum was like, "What?" And he went, "I just find it weird that my son also gets this joke." So I think, like obviously for years you can watch things like The Simpsons where the jokes are like two-way, like the kids get them one way and the adults get them another, and. No, I loved Empire Records. That Empire Records, I think, has very much got tone and similarities to Scott Pilgrim itself. I think
to me.
Yeah. So, and when you talk about
the actually, man, it got cut to shit too. And I think that I remember there was a DVD I think I had that had a bunch of extra scenes put back in it or something that really kind of balanced that out. But man, I love that bit when the dude who's obsessed with guar gets he gets eaten or what. Empire Records is really cool. Was it Rex Manning Day?
Oh, yes. Rex Manning Day.
Yes.
I remember one time in my early 20s when I was dating Ramona in my life. One of her favorite movies was Empire Records. But every time we watched it, when Liv Tyler takes off her shirt or dress or whatever, like it always bothered her, and she always had to make mention that it's just such an important day to her. She's there to throw herself at Rex Manning, but her panties and her bra don't match. And she's like, oh, that always bothered her.
Oh, that's just reminded me of like someone, like I dated early 20s and they were like, I made the effort to wear matching underwear.
Listen, it is a big deal, okay? Because a lot of times you got to buy those pieces separate, and shit, at 21, that's expensive. Yeah. Just saying.
It's Rex Manning Day. You know, you figure like this is like you're going to bring out the best of the best, right?
Yeah.
The best of the best, the best of the best with honors. Right. Sorry, Men in Black joke.
Men in Black.
Got Men in Black on the brain. Luckily we didn't make ourselves watch the cartoon show. But anyway, bring the book club to a close. I think we've talked about Scott Pilgrim Volume 4 for way long enough.
Volume 3.
Volume 3 for way long enough. Overall, I would say I liked it. I probably didn't love it. I preferred volumes 1 and 2 to volume 3, but I did enjoy it. I did love the development of it. And just Robbie, overall, just summarize, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I loved it. I love the progression of the series. I think it strengthened. I think it tightened in the story. I think it developed the characters and the world of the characters better. And that's what this book is going to do. And I love that it takes its time to build this. You know, he had a plan when he started that we're going to get there. We're going to take our time to do it, right? Nowadays, it wouldn't even happen because if your book, books get canceled so quickly nowadays. So I love the time that he took to develop it, and it's starting to come to fruition here for me. I really love the going deeper into Scott's past, building Ramona up, strengthening that relationship, having a big trial that both of them have to go through together, and then that's just set up for what's to come. So I really enjoyed it, and I think that they've just been getting better.
What about you, Jasmine?
I liked this one, but I did not enjoy it as much as the first ones. I think the first two, the dialogue is more relatable to me. So I just kind of enjoyed reading the first two a little bit more than I enjoyed reading this one, but I did enjoy the action more in this one. I couldn't place it when I was reading it, but when Robbie said that the drawing itself, like the art itself, got a bit tighter, I think that's probably why I enjoyed just like the visuals in this one, even though it was in black and white, the visuals in this one are better. So it was a more entertaining read, but I think I laughed a lot more reading the first two than I did reading this one.
Yeah. So Robbie, before we go, this episode's going to come out. I know we're recording on Sunday. This episode will come out on Wednesday, which is only in a couple of days. So it's a few days before the end of before Christmas. But do you have anything planned for Pop Culture Philosophers to see out the rest of the year and for early next year?
Yeah, a lot of our shows are on hiatus right now, but PCP Movie Night returns January 9th with They Live, John Carpenter's They Live. I'm excited for that. But we do have our Festivus stream coming up on Friday, December 23rd. It's our 5th annual Festivus stream. Join me and the excitable PCP crew as we air our grievances, show our feats of strength, and gather around the Festivus pole for a good holiday fun time.
Like, do you want to just tell us a little bit more? What about Festivus? Like, when you say the holiday pole, what do you do with it?
It's an aluminum pole instead of a Christmas tree. That's all it is. You never seen an episode of Seinfeld?
Yeah, Seinfeld?
No, I haven't seen it.
All right, you got to watch
Festivus for the rest of us.
Yeah, you got to watch the episode of Seinfeld called "The Strike," and you'll understand it. It's a holiday created by George Costanza's father to go against the commercialization of Christmas. So instead of a Christmas tree, you just have an aluminum pole. And I have a legit aluminum pole that we took from a construction site. I have a legit aluminum pole that I like to use. You air your grievances. So everything that pissed us off in the year, we'll just, and that's always our favorite bit. Like,
of course,
it's time to just unleash the beast, right? And then we share feats of strength, which is just because in the lore, the Festivus doesn't end until you pin the host, right, in a wrestling match or something like that, right? So we're not going to wrestle, obviously. So what we do is we show our feats of strength with our best pickups of the year. Well, whether it's toys or comics or whatever, So it's a little bit of a glorified show and tell. The audience votes on who was the most feats of strength, and then and then we could. It's a good fun time. You should watch the Seinfeld episode, The Strike,
before Friday, the 23rd,
and you'll understand everything.
Okay,
it's the Bible of Festivus.
Yeah. I will try. I've never seen any Seinfeld, so one day. Anyway, so we had no book club throughout this year because unfortunately life happened. We did do what we could with Geeks Unleashed. I think we did pretty well, actually, to be honest.
We turned it around.
We turned it around. I think the first half of the year was lacking, and then September onwards we've done well. So there was no book club other than this one. We knew we couldn't miss the Geeks Unleashed Christmas special. That is Scott Pilgrim. So I did say to Jasmine, even though there's no book club, we're going to make sure we bring Scott Pilgrim. We will be back with the book club. We have had some early-ish discussions. There will be more regulatory episodes of Late to the Party, so don't worry. We'll chat about it over the Christmas and come up with a plan, and you'll hear from us. But thanks for listening. This is going to be the final episode at all of Geeks Unleashed in 2020, but we will be back. This episode is going to come out after we've gone live on Instagram, but if you haven't already watched it, you can go back and watch. We're going to do a little live episode on Instagram, which is where we are, Geeks Unleashed, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
And you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcast, Google, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, we're everywhere. So please leave us a 5-star review and tell your geeky friends.
Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and watching.
Yeah, good journey.
And join him, Robbie.
Of course, man. Station. Pop.